It's Thursday, everyone, May 8th. I'm Benit Brach here in the CBC Vancouver newsroom. Here's what we are following today. Well, a new pope has been elected. Cardinal Robert Prevost has been announced as the next pope. This election makes him the first American pope the 2,000-year history of the Catholic Church has seen, and he has selected his name to be Pope Leo XIV. One professor says he was surprised by the decision, but also sees parallels to Pope Francis.
An American pope is sort of shocking, to have somebody who represents one of the biggest superpowers in the world. It's never happened before. I think he's in line with Francis. I think there's going to be a lot of pushback against a lot of what we've seen going on politically in the U.S. as well. And I'm not sure, how the Holy Spirit works in all these processes, but I think that this could be an interesting counterweight in some ways.
He also says Pope Leo's references to care for the environment, for the poor, for migrants are some indications that he is in line with Pope Francis. And Pope Leo is originally from Chicago, but he's also a Peruvian citizen and lived in the country for years, first as a missionary and then as an archbishop. And the province is taking new steps to improve safety at festivals by hiring a new commissioner. This comes after 11 people were killed at the Lapu Lapu Day Street Festival last month in Vancouver. A former Chief Justice Christopher Hinkson has been appointed to conduct a review. Premier Eby says these efforts will help guide event organizers across BC to maximize safety. And organizers say they will focus on hosting more festivals and also growing to be more resilient.
Our community leaders and also our community members are very passionate in showcasing their culture, their heritage, and their contribution to the province. So when we were discussing with them and chatting with them about canceling or not, or continuing with the event, the overpouring amount of eagerness to continue and move on with the event is important because it's a way for us to heal.
Eby says the commissioner is expected to report back by June 30th. Meanwhile, BC's public safety critic says the premier scrambled for a solution that doesn't address underlying mental health concerns. Okay, and the Honda Celebration of Light fireworks competition will go ahead this summer for its 33rd season. This time it will be 3 Canadian teams that are facing off against each other. So they include the Yukon, Quebec, and Nova Scotia. The dates of the shows are July 19th, 23rd, and the 26th. The fireworks, they have drawn huge crowds in the past, and organizers say they will be working closely with the city, police, and other partners to make sure it's safe to attend. And Vancouver Fire Rescue Services is reminding people to have working smoke detectors installed. This comes after crews saved 7 students from a burning house this week.
And again, they had fire and smoke fully charged in the attic just above them, 1 sheet of drywall away, and they were in bed completely unaware of what was going on. And the call that we had, urgent call we put out today, is the importance of having a working smoke alarm. If had there been some there, they would have had early notification.
He says guidelines would include 1 working alarm per home level and outside every sleeping area, and that homeowners working without smoke alarms, without them, could be facing fines. And you are updated. Stay with us here on CBC News BC. BC Today is coming up next with more reaction on Pope Leo.
Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us. We'll get you updated on the new Pope elected this morning. And on the open line, Alberta separatism. How serious is that sentiment? We'll be joined by an Alberta legal expert, and we'll take your calls. Plus, each year, Coast Mental Health's Courage to Come Back Awards honors people who have faced adversity in their life and now gives back to their community. We'll meet one of this year's recipients and we'll ask for your story. How have you overcome a big challenge in your own life? I'm Michelle Elliott. Welcome to BC Today. It's official. We now have a new pope. And for the first time in the Catholic Church's 2,000-year history, an American one. That was the moment the newly anointed Pope Leo XIV emerged from the balcony at St. Peter's Square. A crowd of thousands from around the globe erupted to greet the new leader of the Catholic Church. American Cardinal Robert Francis Prevost has become Pope Leo, and the election of an American pope came as a surprise to many. Prevost is 69 years old, born in Chicago, and characterized to be a centrist leader. He served 2 decades in Peru before he became a naturalized citizen there. His first words in his address were, "Peace be with you all." The papal conclave lasted about 2 days, with the largest conclave in modern times, with 133 cardinal electors. Much more on that story, of course, throughout the day here on CBC. Right now, talks of Alberta's separatism continue to flare following last week's federal election. Alberta Premier Daniel Smith is hoping a new Mark Carney-led Liberal government will mean a reset of the relationship between Alberta and the federal government. Smith made the comments in an address on Monday, while also criticizing attacks on Alberta and highlighting sentiments from some in the province to hold a referendum on separating from Canada.
Alberta didn't start this fight, but rest assured we will finish it and come out of it stronger and more prosperous than ever. Let's talk about the elephant in the room, that being separation. We are well aware that there is a large and growing number of Albertans that have lost hope in Alberta having a free and prosperous future. The vast majority of these individuals are not fringe voices to be marginalized or vilified. They are loyal Albertans.
Meanwhile, BC Premier David Eby reacted to those calls for separation, urging unity among the provinces.
I understand. You've got a couple of conservative premiers in Saskatchewan and Alberta. Their preferred candidate was not successful in the federal election. They have strong bases of support for the Conservatives in those provinces. They're navigating tricky waters. But I certainly encourage them all, Premier Smith, Premier Moe, and I believe that they're on board for this, to work together for the good of the country, to hold the country together, and to push back strongly on any kind of separatist sentiment.
Well, Alberta Premier Danielle Smith's frustration are finding a sympathetic ear among some in BC. Laura Jones is president of the Business Council of BC. Now, she does not support Alberta's separation, but she did tell the Canadian press, quote, Alberta's concerns around policies like emissions caps on oil and gas must be taken seriously. And, quote, the reality is that implementing an emissions cap risks undermining affordability, reconciliation, and trade diversification. Now, the Business Council of BC is drafting a letter that will be sent to MPs next week, and it outlines what they say is wrong with the economy and what they suggest as solutions to fix it. Now, we did request an interview from the Business Council of BC, but no one was available today. We'd like to hear from you now. How seriously do you take the threat of Alberta separation? And what do you think Ottawa needs to do to address that frustration behind it? You can call us 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733. You can hit pound 690 on your cell phone. Our email is bctoday@cbc.ca. And joining me now from Edmonton is Eric Adams, law professor at the University of Alberta. Good afternoon. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, happy to be here.
What do you see is behind this conversation now, right? It's an ongoing conversation for many years, but right now, what's behind this conversation about Alberta separation?
Well, I think you're right that it's always flickered on the sidelines of Alberta politics. Flared into a bit more life, though, during the last few years, and in particular in the last few months of this federal election campaign. Especially, I think, because it seemed for so much of the past 2 years or so that the federal Conservative Party was very likely to win, and I think there were people in Alberta that has started to measure the drapes, so to speak, and all of a sudden, fortune or misfortune, depending on your politics, intervened, and politics changed. And when the federal Liberals won that last election, there had begun to be voices already in the Alberta political community, Preston Manning among them, who said, "Look, if the Liberals come back, we're going to have a serious conversation about separation in this province." And that is exactly what's transpired in the last week or so.
And what do you think of the way that the Premier, Danielle Smith, is handling this? Because she's saying, I'm not the one promoting this, but if there are enough signatures on a citizen's petition for a ballot, for a referendum, I will not get in the way. At the same time, she's dealing with a different prime minister than was expected, perhaps months ago. So, or in terms of who would be the Liberal leader. So, what are your observations in terms of how she's kind of straddling the lines here?
Well, there is a fundamental difference in this respect from the Quebec sovereignty movement, which was always led by the provincial government, a provincial government that was seeking sovereignty, put forward the referendum question to the public and was hoping and actively campaigning that the public would vote yes in order to have Quebec separate and form an independent country. Here in Alberta, a different approach, where perhaps mindful of the different political constituencies in the province, we have a premier who is not wanting to be aligned with either end of that spectrum. So she says, it's not our referendum question, but we've lowered the threshold to allow citizens to put questions like, should Alberta separate, onto a province-wide referendum. And really, I think there's some who think she's effectively just contracting out the question of Alberta separation, and maybe she's happy to do so. And that allows her to both have the separation question, which I think she imagines will strengthen her bargaining hand in negotiations with the federal government and with other premiers, and also at the same time saying, well, it's not my referendum question. It's just that Albertans feel this way.
Yeah, and how widespread is that feeling among Albertans?
We've seen polling data that sometimes tops out at about 30% support for some form of Alberta separation, although it's very hard to know because oftentimes those kinds of questions are more about political frustration with Ottawa than necessarily the view that Alberta should become an independent country. But no question, there is a core political support for that view. And maybe, again, it's especially in a moment of upswing given the federal election. It's never been anywhere close to 50%. I'd be shocked if they could pull that off in a referendum, but it's at least enough of the political conversation here that at least in the short term and maybe for a long time to come, it's going to be a dominant political aspect of our conversations.
My guest is Eric Adams, a law professor at the University of Alberta, and we're asking you, how seriously do you take this threat, this notion of Alberta separatism, and what can Ottawa do to address the frustration behind it? You can call us 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733, or you can just hit pound 690 on your cell phone. Our email is bctoday@cbc.ca. Our first caller is Kirsten in Victoria. Hi, Kirsten. Go ahead. Thanks for calling.
Hi. Thank you for taking my call. My concern is not that great in terms of Alberta separating. And I believe that a lot of what the Danielle Smith is facing as Premier of Alberta is from policies both from within Alberta and without Alberta. Specifically, I believe that she and her constituents are worried about the changes that may be happening to Alberta in terms of energy production and how that impacts her and her constituents. Specifically, how the change from oil and gas might be occurring to more earth-friendly. Sorry, my brain's not working right now. To more earth-friendly solutions, as it were, like solar and wind power. And I believe a lot of her constituents are probably afraid of the changes and how it will impact them.
Yeah. What do you think can be done about that? And you're right there, the part of the call, and we heard this from the BC Business Council as well, is to remove the emissions cap on the oil and gas industry. And so what might the federal government or even other provinces do to address that?
I believe it's definitely going to be a thing about not only education, but sitting down and everybody coming to the tables as equals and voicing their fears and frustrations, and most importantly, attacking the ideas and never the person. Because everybody wants what's best for Canada. It's going to be a change, though, of what people think is best for Canada on a personal level.
Kirsten, sounds like a blueprint for discussion overall anywhere. Not attacking the person, but ideas if you're having a debate. Thanks so much for the call in Victoria.
Thank you for taking my call. Bye now.
Bye-bye. Jim is next now in the Thompson Valley. Hi, Jim.
Hello.
Yeah, your thoughts on the notion of Alberta separating?
Well, I'd like to give you a little history. Pierre Elliott Trudeau brought in the National Energy Program, which the Americans hated. And the Americans used their influence, pulled rigs out of Alberta, pulled investment out, laid off 50,000 people in Calgary, and caused a lot of political havoc. And Western separation has been kind of an issue since. We have too much American influence in Alberta. That's a big problem. And oddly enough, even one of the separatist parties, when I looked at it a year ago on the website, it was a dual citizen operating, the leader.
And you're from Alberta, Jim?
Born and raised.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I don't understand why there's so much hatred in Alberta. I don't think Albertans will separate. If they have a referendum, I'd be shocked. I would fight against that. But there's so much hate created, and it's got a lot to do with American influence in our political system there.
Interesting.
It's highly Americanized, and, the pipelines go south. The Conservatives in Alberta built every pipeline south because they're American influence. It took acts of Parliament by Liberals to build a gas pipeline eastward and oil pipelines westward.
Jim, thank you very much for that. A really interesting point there about where that sentiment may come from as well. Cody and Kimberly, hi there. What are your thoughts on Alberta's the rumblings of separatism?
Well, I guess we do live in a democracy, right? So if they vote to have a referendum and it passes, then I guess they're on their own. But my real question is, so what involvement are they going to be left with within Canada? So if they're their own separate country, they no longer will hold Canadian passports. They will no longer have Canadian currency. They will no longer have the benefits of our social welfare programs, RCMP. Do they get to just separate and keep whatever part of Canada they want, or are they starting completely from scratch? That's the logic I don't understand.
Yeah, Cody, thank you so much for your call. And luckily we have someone here who can talk about some of those practicalities, like what, even as a thought exercise, what would be the implication if they did pursue separation? Eric Adams is a law professor at U of A. Yes, go ahead.
Well, Cody's exactly right. He started to create a list, and I'm sure your listeners have started to sketch out a number of others. What about the national parks? What about the Canada Pension Plan? What about the trade agreements that move resources across provinces? There's already pipelines, of course, between Alberta and BC, and the list goes on and on and on. And none of that is predetermined, and none of that is knowable. The only thing that the Supreme Court of Canada says in its secession reference is that if you end up with a positive vote for separation in a referendum, what triggers next is a duty to negotiate. All of the provinces and the federal government and Alberta have to sit down at the table and try and hash out this constitutional crisis. But it doesn't mean that a referendum creates an independent country of Alberta. And of course, First Nations peoples have already in this province said that they do not accept even the premise of separation as a starting point. They say that the treaties are with the Crown and that Alberta can't separate treaty lands. And so if Canada's divisible, is Alberta divisible? What happens if Calgary votes yes and Edmonton votes solidly no? The list of complications is just too numerous to even list. So the only thing that can be said with certainty is that there are an awful lot of uncertainties on whatever road that Alberta might want to travel if it ends up contemplating separation from Canada.
Now, the other avenue that Danielle Smith is taking is this sort of renegotiation, resetting this relationship with the federal government. And she has a list of asks there, right? And as you mentioned earlier, this idea of raising the spectrum of separation may be part of that negotiating process, but part of it does have to do with other provinces as well, seeking energy corridors, getting Alberta oil to the coasts, including here in BC, equalization payments and all of that. So legally, what are the implications there? Can that be done as well?
Well, we're in the firm territory of constitutional politics, not really constitutional law. So the Premier has made a shifting list of demands, she calls them, in order for Alberta to remain a happy part of the Federation. I doubt pretty highly that she's going to walk away with the complete shopping list. But, she's a politician and she's politicking. What these negotiations are about pipelines, I think, is an open question. And I think the Alberta Premier at the moment thinks, look, there's the beginnings of a bit of a national consensus around Canada forming an independent economic unit that's less reliant on the United States. So I think she's trying to exploit that moment. Whether the separatist talk helps her or hurts her in that endeavor, I think is an open question.
We have an email from James who writes, I'm a British Columbian living and working in Grand Prairie, Alberta since 2009. I'm disgusted by the rhetoric of the UCP. There is no need and there's no reason for it. 0 pipelines will then be built. They simply don't think. James, thank you. And thanks for listening to us over there in Grand Prairie. And Nathan Wood writes as well, I think Danielle Smith should be reminded of treaties. Okay, thanks for your emails. Keep them coming. BC Today at cbc.ca. Back to our calls now. We're going to go pretty close to Alberta. Dan in Fort St. John, hello.
Hello.
Thanks for calling in. What are your thoughts on this, the sentiment, the notion, the threat of Alberta separatism?
Well, I'm going to bring an Alberta perspective to it because I've lived in Alberta for 63 years.
Oh, wow. Okay, great.
And I'm also from the Grand Prairie area. So my 2 main points are going to be that Alberta politicians, going back as far as even the middle of the last century, have built their careers around demonizing central Canada and the federal government. So they're just basically singing off the same script. To me, it's baseless. Alberta, there are problems. There's no doubt about that. Not everybody is participating in our economy to the extent that they should be, but Alberta is still the most prosperous area on one of the most prosperous countries on this planet. So I think that, starting fights where they're not warranted, to me is just not, it's just not productive.
And what about the argument from Danielle Smith that they would be even more prosperous, if something like Northern Gateway was approved, or the further oil and gas production goes?
Well, my thought on that is the narrative that I think should be actually talked about right now is the greatest threat to our prosperity in Alberta, or in any province for that matter, does not start in Ottawa. Peak oil is going to happen in the next 5 to 10 years. How are the world markets going to react to that news? That has a more direct effect on Alberta's prosperity than any policy that comes out of Ottawa.
A decline in demand. Okay, Dan, thank you so much.
And also the next big environmental shock,
climate
change. World, heat waves in the United States, a hurricane season that kills tens of thousands. That'll be where we go with oil and gas in the future.
You're starting to cut out, Dan, but I'm really, really glad to hear from you. Thank you so much for the call. Yeah, good to hear from you. Another Albertan as well, joining us from Fort St. John. Let me take Rick now in Dawson Creek. Hi, Rick.
Hi there. How are you?
Your thoughts. Thanks so much for calling in.
Yeah, I'm just over here for work for today, and I live in Alberta, in Grand Prairie, and I've lived in Alberta since '98, originally from the Lower Mainland in Victoria. I'm not a big Danielle Smith fan, but I do like the fact that she's lowered the threshold to give people a say. I don't support I do not support separation. I think it's silly. I don't think it's a good idea. But if there's enough people that say it's a good idea, because the Calgary mayor, the Judy Gondak, I think it was, they were trying to get rid of her, and the amount of people that they had to petition was like astronomical, and it was just not possible. So
it's democracy in action.
If you want to have good democracy, we got to have a say. I think people should have their say, but I don't support it. I think it's just not feasible. The cost would be too much, and I'm just not supporting it at all.
Yeah,
because we got to be. And I'm Canadian. That's me first. I'm Canadian first, and then I've lived in Alberta for a long time, but I also think I'm from BC. So nothing against Alberta, but if you separate, then what's your identity? And I just don't agree with that.
But you appreciate that there's a process.
Yeah, I do appreciate the process because, like I said, when you got to jump through the hoops, if you have a bad leader or you want to have a say on something, the amount of signatures you got to get to before it'd be like, I don't know the numbers. I heard it the other day, and it would be astronomical to get that many people to sign, right?
Yeah, Rick, thank you so much. Good to hear from you. Our last caller is Carrie in Wendell. Hi, Carrie.
Hello.
Yeah.
I just want to have a message to Albertans. The world has noticed your shiny new Corvette in your driveway. And these declarations of love you're getting from foreign countries, it's not your good looks and charm they're after. They want to drive that Corvette like they own it. And I mean your oil. That's what the world's after.
Okay. Carrie, thank you very much. Thank you for the call.
Thanks.
My apologies for jumping in there. I'm just going to wrap with our guest here. And thank you very much for your emails as well. Lots of them coming in to CBC. Alex writes, Albertans are free to vote to leave. They just aren't free to take any of this great land with them. Okay, thank you for your emails. bctoday@cbc.ca. Once again, asking you for your thoughts on the notion, the discussion around Alberta separatism that is flaring up once again. And my guest has been Eric Adams, who's a law professor at the University of Alberta. So what are the parameters now? Like what is the likelihood that this could actually go to a vote, go to a ballot next year?
I certainly think it's possible. The province has lowered the threshold to get these kinds of questions, referendum questions, placed on provincial referendums by citizens. And so I think even now there are signatures gathering to make this a political issue. And in the last few press conferences, the Premier certainly opened the door to this happening and perhaps even quietly welcomes the development. In her view, she says, if the citizens want it, then who are we to stand in the way? Personally, I would have preferred there to be a provincial election on this topic. We didn't have a election where this party was running on a separatist agenda. I think that there may be a place for referenda, but something like a constitutional referendum about the breakup of Canada really should be led by a government that's willing to support it. I think what we're going to see with something like this happening is a lot of division, a lot of oxygen being taken up, and even this call has just shown how many people move across that border between BC and Alberta. The threads that connect Albertans to the rest of this Canada are so varied and diverse. The idea of breaking that all because of a political fight between provincial governments and Ottawa just seems an awful lot of wreckage to leave in the wake.
Eric Adams, good to have you on the show. Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
Eric Adams, law professor at the University of Alberta. We reached him in Edmonton. It's 12:32 now. You're with BC Today here on CBC. I'm Michelle Elliott. Thanks very much for all of your calls and your emails as well. And coming up, we'll talk about the facing challenges in our own lives, and let us know what adversity, what challenge you have faced and how you overcame it. We're going to hear someone's story who has just received a Courage to Come Back award. Hear that story and hopefully yours coming up in this next half hour. Right now, it's time for a CBC News update, and here's Robert Zimmerman.
Good afternoon. For the first time ever, an American has been chosen to lead the Catholic Church. 69-year-old Robert Prevost will take the name Pope Leo XIV. Prevost was born in Chicago and also holds Peruvian citizenship. Premier David Eby says settling the softwood lumber dispute could be the catalyst for a larger trade deal with the U.S. Eby says he and other premiers pressed that point during a meeting with Prime Minister Mark Carney. BC softwood lumber exporters pay duties of more than 14%, which are expected to jump to nearly 35% in the fall. And organizers with the Honda Celebration of Light say, as with past years, a robust safety plan is in place for this year's event. Executive producer Paul Runnels says they are working extremely closely with the city and emergency services. The shows are scheduled for July 19th, 23rd, and 26th. And now the BC forecast on the north coast. Showers this afternoon with a high of 10, highs to 13 with a mix of sun and cloud in the Peace. In the central interior, including Prince George, some sun and cloud with a high of 13 as well. Highs in the low 20s with lots of sunshine in the Kootenays. In the southern interior, including Kelowna, mainly sunny with a high of 19. And increasing cloudiness this afternoon in Greater Victoria. A mix of sun and cloud in Metro Vancouver and the Fraser Valley with highs around 17. That's your CBC News update from Vancouver.
You know, it's you should have seen the newsroom when that white smoke came up. It's like everything stopped. And that's the way when their news breaks, everybody's attention just to the screens.
Yeah, and interesting that it's the first time ever for somebody from the U.S.
An American, yeah. So a lot of conversation around the new pope. And of course, I think some of the interest comes from people having seen the movie Conclave. I'm just guessing.
It could be. I'm sure it is.
You can watch it, but I think I don't know how real it is.
The real life bit, I think, is probably more interesting than the fictional
I would say, to be a fly on the wall, those gilded walls inside the Vatican.
Yes.
I don't. Yeah. But anyway, that's just how a newsroom functions. If you were in here, you would just see suddenly all the meetings stopped and people just, oh my goodness. Okay, now who is it? Who is it? Wait for the keys and wait for the name keys and what they say. Certainly big news today. Rob, thank you very much.
You bet.
Rob Zimmerman in the CBC Vancouver newsroom. And this is BC Today here on CBC. Thanks very much for all of your emails on Alberta's talk about Alberta separating. Again, Danielle Smith saying that she is not promoting it, but if there are enough signatures on petition. It will be a question on a ballot. Lindsay writes, why is no one talking about the fact that Alberta is treaty land? It's not like Alberta can just pack up and take everything and disregard legally binding treaties. And another email as well saying TMX, Trans Mountain, is Canadian owned and not Alberta owned. So lots of your thoughts coming in on that. We'll go through them once more. bctoday@cbc.ca is our address. $12:36 now. You're with BC Today. And the Courage to Come Back Awards celebrate British Columbians who have overcome adversity in their lives and have come to give back to their communities. We're going to hear the inspiring story of one of this year's recipients in a moment. And we're taking your calls as well, asking you what is your own story of overcoming a big challenge in your life. Love to hear from you. 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733. You can also hit pound 690 on your cell phone, or you can email bctoday@cbc.ca. I'm pleased to welcome David Chalke of Burnaby, who is the recipient of the 2025 Courage to Come Back Award in the mental health category. Now, David's a technology entrepreneur who rose to success despite living most of his life without the ability to read. He's neurodivergent and has been diagnosed with acute dyslexia and ADHD. He now works to advocate for literacy. And David, thank you for joining us. Congratulations.
Thank you for having me, Michelle.
Now, the awards were handed out last night. Are you okay? How was sleep?
Yeah, no, I loved it. It was magical.
Yeah. What was it like to receive this award?
Well, when I first considered it to be the mental health category, there's a stigma around that. When you research it, you realize that half of the population of North America has mental health challenges, and it isn't the way people think about it. It's stress, anxiety, trauma, and we all go through that. For me, it happened at a really young age as I went into school, and it just spiraled up. I did all I could to keep myself going, and fortunately, I had a really strong mother who kept me motivated and inspired. Otherwise, as the counselors told me, I'd be dead or in jail.
Wow. And
it's a hard line.
Yeah. Can you tell me about that? What was it like being a young child and I assume struggling to read?
Yeah, it was hell.
Yeah.
I was in the 60s and 70s when I went to school. Teachers have changed a lot. I think there was a different attitude towards it then. Spent a lot of my time in the hallway, getting the strap, put in the dumb row, name on the board, everything possible, because at the time I thought you didn't want to learn. I wanted to learn more than anyone. But the way my brain worked, I couldn't take reading in as memorization, and that's how they teach it. But that's not how the brain learns. It learns through pattern recognition. And until that gets changed, we're going to continue to have this problem.
I'm sorry that happened to you.
Oh, it's okay. I wouldn't change my life for anything, to tell you the truth.
Yeah. Well, you've come around. I mean, I'd love to hear about how that's all turned around. But just trying to process as well for myself that you not only moved in the world in everyday life without being able to read, but you also rose to great success as a business person. How did you achieve that?
Well, for children with neurodiversity, it isn't a matter of intelligence. It's a matter of self-esteem. So with neurodivergent, in fact, many will say it's a gift. Many books say that wiring in the brain actually brings out creativity, but it's suppressed by the suffering that goes on in those early years in the classroom. So for me, having the strength from the family, my self-esteem didn't go as low as others. And as soon as I had the opportunity to move myself forward, then that, I guess, like magic came out. And creative ideas just flowed. I didn't know what I was doing at the time, but it wasn't hard.
Wow.
And I would love people to think who have dyslexic and neurodivergent children to know that in that brain is something magical if they could just get them through the anxiety.
Yeah, and I love that you've talked twice now about the support from your family who kept you going.
So important.
Yeah, just finding someone who will say you have worth.
That you're okay, and you have worth. And the hard line, which I was told I was mentally retarded, was the term they used on me.
Oh, gosh.
And it's gut-wrenching.
Yeah. And so did you even feel the need, I mean, given that you had moved on and achieved the success, did you feel the need to learn to read?
No, honestly. But something happened. It was like magic. When I was taught the way I was taught to read through, as I said, pattern recognition, within 11 hours, I went from being tested like a grade 3 or 4 level to post-university level.
Wow.
And that freed up a part of my brain. So it isn't just the fact you read. It's when you don't read properly, you're using the wrong part of the brain. And it was almost like someone opened a valve. Reading goes over here, cognitive thinking comes back, and I love reading now.
Yeah. Was it, how many books do you read a month?
Probably 10 to 15 books a month, maybe 10 to 15 in my entire life.
Oh, before that. Oh my gosh. And so when you said, this is it, what got you to that moment? Like
Of
saying, I'm going to take this on now. I'm going to
COVID.
learn to read. Oh, really?
Yeah, I had done a lot, but that's what courage to come back means. Come back, and then you sort of lose it.
It's not a straight line.
No, not
No.
reading caused me problems. And when COVID hit, I didn't know what I was going to do. And I called a friend and I said, I don't know what I'm going to do, Fran. And she said, well, there's a gentleman in California making a documentary. And if you'd be willing to go on camera, be filmed every moment of it, they'll show you something that you won't believe.
Wow.
And it worked.
Oh my goodness. And it took 11 hours. Okay. And opened up a whole new world for you.
Beyond a whole new world. As I said, it transforms the brain. You think of it this way. If you had a bad thing happen in your life, like a car accident, you know how quickly your brain can change, or a trauma.
Sure.
The way you learn to read, if it's done the right way, it is simply just a process. You can learn it in hours. Now, for a child, it would still take 100 or 2 hours. But for an adult like me, I could feel it as it happened.
Wow. I can't even imagine.
No, I couldn't.
Wow. This is such a story. David Chalke has just won a Courage to Come Back award. And so as we listen to his story, we'd love to hear yours as well. How have you overcome a big challenge in your own life? Love to hear from you. 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733. You can hit pound 690 on your cell phone. If you'd like to email us your story, you can send it to bctoday@cbc.ca. And so what have you done to give back then? You've become this advocate. What has that part of your life been like?
Well, that's wonderful, because my main thing is to help children and parents. Because, as I said, the number one thing, if a parent can understand the child that is inside, that is stressed, that is in fear, living in fight or flight, they've got cortisol and adrenaline raging through their bodies. They get angry, they shut down, they want to quit. So my real give back, I have years of experience in artificial intelligence. And when I realized what happened in that, I realized it was more than just the teaching of the reading. It was the interaction with the tutor. She was wonderful, how she encouraged me. And that belief in me, I went, I could do that with artificial intelligence.
Wow.
Not to remove a tutor, but to scale it. She could teach one person, and I can teach 100 million at one time.
Oh my goodness. So you're working on an AI program.
I am building an infrastructure for the entire world that anyone with an internet connection, a phone or a device, would be able to connect to it and learn to read that quickly.
Are you telling us we should not be afraid of AI?
If you want to have
I live in fear.
You want to have a segment on AI, that's where I spend half my time, is talking to corporations of people who fear they're going to lose their job.
Yeah.
No, it's not that at all.
Okay.
I encourage people to understand it, and it is a wonderful thing.
And as you work on this this AI for reading,
It's
kind
called
of
Reading Road.
Reading Road, is it something that's private? Like how would you distribute it?
Well, yes, that's the great thing. It's not an app, it's not a software program, it's not a website. It will simply be a connection, like water and electricity coming into your home. It'll be an infrastructure. If you have a phone or a device, you'll simply just click onto it. And my plan, Kevin Bobruski, my partner, and I are building it. We think we can give it to most of the world for free. For institutions and schools and that sort of thing, there'll be small fees. We have to recoup some money, but I'm not in it for the money. The idea is everyone, it's a human right. People should know how to read and be taught properly.
You certainly dream big.
Of course,
Yeah.
that's how I do it.
What would be your, and because people face all kinds of challenges, and I know we're going to get some calls from people talking about whatever it is in their own life that they've overcome. What are some skills or some personal sort of things, tools that you've used to help yourself get through?
And my mom, who was the one behind me the entire time, taught me a very important thing, that we're not the voice in our head. And that chatter that goes on all the time, especially for children that are stressed, anxiety, you're bad, you're no good, you're dumb, you're stupid. And when she taught me how to separate that, that is consciousness, awareness, and that if you hear that voice, who's hearing it? That is the you. And as I learned to separate the two, as much as it would attack me, I could pull away from it. I call that the thinking. And the thoughts are those big things you talked about. They're free to rise up at that point. Thinking will try and take it away. But thoughts, it's what Einstein said, they come beautifully when you clear your mind.
Okay. Clear the negative self-talk.
Yes.
Yeah.
And you can't stop it, but you can be aware that it is not you doing it. It is the mind running wild.
Let's take a call here from Stephanie in Kelowna. Hi, Stephanie.
Hi.
Hi. Thanks very much for calling. What did you want to say about overcoming challenges?
Oh, I'm just driving around. I'm a home care nurse in Kelowna, and I'm on hands-free, so don't worry. I was just fascinated to hear just your conversation just about overcoming this. I just have a bit of a story. So I grew up in Kelowna. I failed grade 3. I struggled in school. I became very OCD about school after I failed it. I did not have an overly supportive family, but I had a lot of help. Sorry, kind of emotional.
Yeah.
I had a lot of counseling and help over the last few years, and I'm sure I'm dyslexic, never diagnosed. But what really struck me through this conversation is just when you overcame it. I don't know. I've had a lot of counseling, and in probably the last 5 years, I've started reading. And I never read. I maybe read 15 books in my whole life.
Yeah.
But I had also a person that helped me through university. I had a person at Dairy Queen that read my papers, helped me through. I really believe you can overcome all of, being neurodivergent. My son is neurodivergent. He's now graduating in French. And they were told that he would never do very well. And he's overcome that with our support. It's just amazing, and I'm fascinated, and I want to read into the book.
And Stephanie, who was that person for you?
It was a person. It was my manager at Dairy Queen who helped me get through school.
Oh my goodness!
Believe it or not, yes, his name was Mark, and I am just so grateful for him every day for what he has done. Right, because it's having that person who believes in you and tells you that you're okay.
Oh, Stephanie, what a wonderful story. And to think that you are providing that support now for your son.
Yeah, and I'm really interested to listen to more. And does he have a book or a website? Or I just am fascinated just hearing this story.
David?
Well, I only just learned to read. I haven't written a book yet. But there is a website, which is readingroad.ai, as in augmented intelligence. We don't have it there yet, but it'll tell you a little bit more about what'll be coming.
And Stephanie, the Courage to Come Back Awards, they have his story up on their website as well if you'd like to learn more about him, okay?
It's amazing. So I really appreciate you bringing this to light. I've really struggled with this for myself and also for my son. And I just think it's wonderful that there is going to be more support, because I do believe that I always felt I was different.
Yeah.
And I do read now. And it's pretty amazing when you start to read, when you just connect those things and are able to do it. It's mind-blowing. That's all I have to say.
Oh, Stephanie, thank you for your story. And hello to Mark, if Mark is listening or watching somewhere. All the best to you, okay? Thanks for the call.
Mind-blowing would be a good term.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know that. I have a daughter with Down syndrome, and I've done the work with her on reading, and it really is kind of tapping into what she cares about, what she's passionate about, which is a lot of Disney. So that's what we work on. We're taking your calls as well. You can share your own story of overcoming a challenge in your own life. 1-800-825-5950. 604-669-3733. You can hit pound 690 on your cell phone. If you want to email us your story, our email address is bctoday@cbc.ca. And David, we've talked about family support. I wonder too about just society and how society needs to change. You had, really awful things happen to you growing up in school. How does the environment, school supports? We talked about school funding yesterday, and I had a lot of parents whose children have diverse learning needs. How does society need to change to support these successes?
Fundamentally, there's nothing wrong with neurodiversity. Neurodiversity just means a different wiring in the brain. The problem is, when you go in the classroom, that different wiring makes reading almost impossible. So, in answer to your question, the ultimate thing to do, as I said, change the way children learn to read from kindergarten to grade 3. You change their mental well-being, and then they don't suffer. And that is the entire thing that causes the problem in society, emotional distress.
Yeah, that's a real roadblock.
Yeah, and the schools have never looked at it. It was a taboo thing to talk about. But now we're understanding, mental awareness and understanding of the mind. The mind leads the learning. As you know with your daughter, if she feels good, she will learn. If she's stressed or anxiety, she will shut down. And that's how every person learns.
Absolutely. How did the Courage to Come Back Awards come about?
A friend of mine that I had met many years ago that was in the dyslexia world, Fran Blackwood, when COVID hit and, I was suffering, wanting to know what I should do, I said, I'm going to overcome this thing. I got to figure out what's wrong with me. And she guided me to John Cochrane in the U.S., who was making the Hollywood documentary. And I had nothing to lose and everything to gain, because if they could teach me to read, I could then show the world that anyone could do it.
Yeah.
And that was how it came about.
Wow. And so following that, I guess you got a call saying, we'd like to recognize the work that you've done.
Yes. Yeah, I couldn't believe it.
What was it like to get that call?
I was numb because I never thought I would get an award for what was dumb and stupid, but I realized that I now know that I wasn't that. I just was wired differently, and now I can read as good as anyone. So I wanted to share that, and I am so grateful for the Courage to Come Back Award and all the people there for just exposing me so that others can learn, like the mother who just called in.
Yeah.
You can solve this. You can't get rid of the neurodivergence, but there's nothing wrong with it. Einstein, Edison, Picasso, they all had it. But the school, reading, can sometimes destroy a child, and that's when it goes wrong.
We have another caller now as we talk about overcoming adversity and big challenges in your life. And Kirsty is calling from Vancouver. Hi, Kirsty. Welcome to the show.
Hi there. I was just going to share my story because it's something that has changed my life for the better. But at the time, it was a traumatic incident. It happened 15 years ago. I was living in the UK at the time, working in the prison system there, which I do here in Vancouver as well. But what happened was my partner, we went on holiday to Greece, and he unfortunately drowned on the second day of our holiday, and I almost drowned trying to save him. It was extremely traumatic. We were in the water for, 20 minutes. I was holding him unconscious for 15, 20 minutes, trying to get us back in. I finally caught a rope that they were throwing to us, and I was dragged in, but I lost him in the process. And it was something that was life-changing. But what I realized at the time was that I couldn't be in the place I was. I couldn't stay in that place. I was an instructor in a job that I hear constant trauma and the marginalized people I work with, I have to have a certain strength about me, and I knew I could not stay in this traumatic place. And so I decided to get therapy 3 months in, which cognitive behavioral therapy, where I worked through my traumatic incident, my PTSD. I'll always have it, but I have known that everything happens for a reason, and that reason that happened to me was for me to understand trauma firsthand, so I could then go on and be the person I am today and work with the people I do today. So that's my story.
Oh my gosh.
It's a bit different. It's a bit different from your story, which is incredible. It was a life-changing thing that I had to overcome, but it's made me a better person. Sure, you don't think it then, but
Now the empathy
find
you have now.
inner resiliency and strength, you know.
Wow. What you went through something devastating, Kirsty, and you're right. The empathy that you have, that you exude now. I hope that you are, taking care of yourself. If I could give you an award, I would, because the way that you worked your way through and still think of others.
I'll give you mine.
Yeah. Kirsty, thank you so much. You are an inspiration. Thank you very much for calling in. I'm so sorry for your loss.
You.
Yeah. That's Kirsty in Vancouver. Wow.
In the incarceration, over 80% of the inmates read below a grade 3 level.
Yeah.
Most all of them, the suffering occurred most in the early years of school. Many of them don't want to be criminals, but they have no alternative.
And to have someone like Kirsty be there
now.
with that understanding is so important. Thank you for joining me for this
thank you.
conversation. Congratulations again.
Thank you so very much.
That's David Chalke, who has just been the recipient of a Courage to Combat Awards. Congratulations to all. And thank you so much to Kirsty and all our callers this afternoon. I'm Michelle Elliott, and we are taking your emails as well. And you heard David talk about the importance of his mother, in achieving his success. We are taking your messages to Mom for tomorrow on the show ahead of Mother's Day. So do send us your email now, bctoday@cbc.ca, or call us tomorrow to give your message on air.